A new survey suggests the UK has the unhappiest teenagers in Europe. According to analysis by the Children's Society, 15-year-olds in the UK are reporting low life satisfaction, more than anywhere else in Europe, amid what experts are describing as a happiness recession. But why is this happening? What pressures are our young people facing? And how is it different from previous generations? Well, let's speak first to the Chief Executive of the Children's Charity, Mark Russell. Mark, good to speak to you. Talk us through what you found, if you would.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me on, Fiona. We've published the 13th Good Childhood Report. We've been doing this work for over 15 years, studying children's well-being, asking young people how their lives are. And every year we've reported on children's well-being, it's got worse. But out of all of the reports we've ever published, this one is the most alarming because it shows, as you've rightly said, that British young people are ranking at the very bottom of the European league table, if you like, of children's happiness and children's well-being. 27 different countries, we're right at the bottom. We're at the bottom by quite considerable distance. On all the key indicators we've measured, British children are faring the worst. And I think this is really disturbing and really shocking. And it requires us as a society to recognise that this generation of young people are living under extraordinary pressure and that we need to do more to improve their lives and improve their futures. I'm always driven by Gordon Brown's view that when he was Prime Minister, he said that 20% of our country are young people, but they're also 100% of our future. And I think every British child, wherever they live in this country, deserves the best start in life. And right now, we're clearly failing far too many young people.
Mark, we've got another couple of guests coming, but I just wanted you to just drill into what you think are the reasons behind these figures.
Yes, of course. Well, there are a number of reasons. First and foremost is that we have extremely high levels of child poverty in this country. Over 4 million young people across the UK are living in poverty, and that is driving these numbers. The second thing is we have an education system that doesn't work for every young person. There is a huge deal of pressure placed on young people. We test very often, much more than other European countries. We also have taken out of the last 10 years £2 billion worth of support for young people and youth services. And so every child needs a trusted adult in their life who isn't their parent or carer or their teacher. And with youth centres closed all around the country, what we're now seeing is young people reach crisis point before they get support and help. This generation have been through so much. They've been through COVID. They're living through a cost of living crisis. And one other very shocking stat in this report, Fiona, is that when we ask children what they're most worried about, for many, many years, that answer was the environment. They're worried about climate change, the state of the world. For the last 2 years, the single biggest issue young people in Britain are worried about is the cost of living crisis. And that is because children absorb the anxiety of their family. And that stat tells me that around this country, there are families who are struggling to keep their heads above water, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the gas bill, and children are absorbing that. And we're arguing that the government needs to prioritise young people's happiness and young people's well-being. Because if we do, they'll do better at school and we'll have better rounded adults in the future.
Mark, let's bring in another couple of guests. Stay with us, though. Sure. Olivia Brown, who's 19, the Vice Chairperson of the Scottish Youth Parliament. We can also speak to William Deacon from the suicide prevention charity PAPYRUS UK. Good evening to both of you. Olivia, if I come to you first, you're 19, as I said. What pressures are you facing?
Well, thanks for having me on, Fiona. I think a lot of what this report is pointing to the fact that we are seeing the really long-term hangover and effects of the pandemic here. Education systems don't suit the needs of young people. There's a lack of youth work funding. There's a lack of mental health support across the board. And I personally, as a young person, have been witness to all of that. And then, as Mark says, this is all just exacerbated by the financial challenges that the UK is facing. And luckily, there is a solution to this. It is that decision makers need to more meaningfully engage young people in their decision making and in their policy making, because as Mark says, young people are aware of these really immediate issues around the cost of living crisis and are very conscious of the fact that their parents can't pay the bills. And that is evidence that we understand these problems and we are more than able to take part in the conversations around how we solve them.
Is that not happening just now, Olivia? Do you feel you're not being listened to?
I think we can see in this report that there is a long way to go with how young people are engaged in politics. In Scotland, we've made some really positive steps recently with UNCRC incorporation, but we need better support around the cost of living crisis. Homelessness is a really immediate issue for young people, and For me personally, I don't see myself getting on the property ladder, for example, in, the next decade. There's also the fact that we have no mental health support. Waiting lists are really long. SYP is about to launch a new campaign around encouraging all people who work with young people to gain mental health training, because at the end of the day, they are kind of young people's first point of support, and we need to be able to provide them youth work services and that kind of first-hand immediate support when they are on these waiting lists. There's a
Sorry, I was going to bring in Olivia. I was going to bring in William Deacon here. William, you've been listening across to Olivia and to Mark. What are your thoughts, I suppose, on the pressures that young people in particular are facing just now, and the experiences that you're hearing about?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, I just want to say on behalf of the PAPYRUS that we really do welcome this research coming from the Children's Society. Unfortunately, what we're hearing in the report doesn't come as a surprise to us. Listening to young people on our Hope Line and the reports we get from the staff who work on the Hope Line, a lot of young people are really struggling with pressure of school, social media, moving away from home, and that's all a really difficult point in life as well. And then you throw in the impact of the pandemic, the cost of living crisis that we're facing. And it really does highlight, just to echo that point that's been said of providing support to young people, opportunities to young people, but also training to those that do work with young people so that they feel confident having conversations around mental health and having conversations around suicide, which I think is really, really important from our perspective, as it is the biggest killer of our young people, unfortunately.
And are people having that conversation, William? And we've covered the issue of suicide prevention here a lot here on Drivetime, and do try to talk about it. Do you think things are getting better in that conversation?
I think they are getting better, but the unfortunate reality is there still is a long way to go. We know in the UK we lose around 200 school-aged children per year to suicide, and in Scotland we have the highest death rates per capita for suicide across the rest of the home nations. So whilst it is getting better, we really recognise that more people need support in how to have these conversations. And I would echo to anyone who is listening today who might be concerned about someone they're working with, someone they care about, someone that they love. To reach out to our Hope Line, you can text 88247 or reach out by phone to 0800 068 4141 and get free professional advice on how to support someone who you might have concerns or having thoughts of suicide, or maybe has attempted to take their life in the past.
Mark, Russ, I'm going to bring you back in here. One of the things you did mention, social media, and I guess it's inevitable we have to get round to discussing that, and I know it's blamed for a lot of things. There's good and there's bad, but we can't ignore it, can we? What impact do you think, or are you picking up, that social media is having on happiness of young people?
Well, I think I'd want to say that just remember that this report looks at 27 different countries and they've all got social media there as well. So it's not the overriding factor why British children are doing so bad in terms of mental health and well-being, but it is a factor. And if you look at our report, you'll see in particular one of the most shocking aspects of our report is the rapid decline in girls' well-being, much more deeply than boys. And I think that's really concerning. And if I take my chief executive of the Children's Society hat off for a second and put my school governor hat on, in the school where I'm a governor, we've seen a rise of toxic masculinity driven by some influencers on social media, and that has impacted how boys treat girls. So there's a huge society conversation here about how we improve girls' mental health and well-being in particular. But I'd also want to say to anybody who's listening who's got young people in their lives, yes, we need big action from government. We need more investment in early help. We need more investment in youth work. We need young people's voices listened to by politicians and decision makers. But anybody who's got a young person in their life, take time with that young person, listen to what's going on in their life. You don't just be so busy doing other things that we just forget to carve that time out, and be alert to the signals that young person may be sending off about how life is for them as well. Because this is a tough time to be a teenager. I look at the young people we work with. We work with over 70,000 young people. It's hard work being a young person today, and I think my passionate belief is that every young person in this country, regardless of their background, deserves the best start in life and deserves to have a decent home and be free from poverty and abuse and harm and be the best versions of themselves. And right now, there are too many young people in this country for whom that is not true. And the way we change that is by shining a light on this. And so I thank you for making this such a key part of your program tonight, because we've got to do better. 19th century American philosopher called Frederick Douglass once said, "It's better for society to build stronger children than fix broken adults." And I think he was absolutely spot on.
Gosh, well, Olivia, I'm going to bring you back in here. Lots to unpack, and I wish we had longer, but we've got a wee bit longer. Olivia, talking about social media, Mark was referencing young women and the impact on them, and I have lost track of the number of times that I've said, thank goodness there was no social media and smartphones when I was young. What impact has it had on you and those around you, social media, good or bad?
Well, social media is a really tricky one because it can be a really powerful and empowering outlet for young people, allowing them to maintain friendships and express themselves. Like for me, particularly for the pandemic, social media really was my lifeline because it's how I kind of maintained contact with society. But equally, there is a really nasty side to social media, and young people have access to harmful content on it and misinformation, which can really negatively impact us. There are a lot of resources out there that can support young people in how they use social media. SYP, the Scottish Youth Parliament, we have young.scot, which anyone in the UK can use. But these really aren't utilised enough. And on top of that, social media companies do have a real responsibility to make sure that children are protected from this really damaging content.
William, I'm keen to get your thoughts on social media and whether or not there's perhaps a gender split. I mean, we heard Mark Russell saying there that it does have a significant impact, perhaps slightly more on women. On young women? What sort of experience are you hearing about, empirical evidence?
So I think in regards to social media, I think the reality is that it isn't going anywhere. And it's something that we need to kind of learn how to work with and utilize. So, for us, we do a lot of suicide prevention campaigns through social media because we know we can reach people that need that way. But then going into, that split, we do know that, and it's very binary, the data that we get into regards to male and female, that females are, we're seeing an increase in attempts and deaths by suicide at the moment. And whilst men are more likely to die by suicide, we know that women are more likely to attempt. So as much as we can look at this data and say, well, men are more likely to do this and women more likely to do this, the unfortunate reality is it is an issue that is impacting everyone. And we really need to be supporting our young people, no matter, what gender they are or what their beliefs are, anything like that. We've
got about another minute, and sorry to rush you, but I'd like all of you just to tell me briefly, and I know it's a complex issue, is what would help? What would you think would help young people's mental health? Mark, first of all.
Health and well-being at the centre of school life and not as an optional extra.
Okay. Olivia, what do you think?
In one sentence, as I said earlier, it is involving young people in decision-making and empowering them to make their voices heard.
Okay. And William, what do you think? What would help? What would you like to see?
I think more training for staff, those working with young people in communities, so people feel more comfortable having conversations around suicide and know how to support those who are at risk of dying by suicide themselves.
Well, listen, I appreciate you all coming on tonight. I appreciate your honesty and your passion, and thank you so much. Fascinating speaking to you. Chief Executive of the children's charity, Mark Russell there. Olivia Brown we also spoke to, who's 19 Vice Chairperson of the Scottish Youth Parliament, and William Deacon from the suicide prevention charity PAPYRUS UK. If you need any more information on these issues, or if you've been affected by anything we have spoken about, the BBC, of course, does have an action line at bbc.co.uk/action line. The number for the Samaritans is 116 123 116 123.